Thank you all for having me. And yeah, really excited to be here, especially amongst hardcore GRC professionals. To be doing a study group in the evening during the week, you have to be pretty hardcore, really into this. So I'm amongst my people, my tribe. I'm excited about this. So today we'll be talking about navigating CMMC. So CMMC stands for Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. So you see why they have shortened it to just CMMC, because it's quite the tongue twister. But I will be just providing you a high-level overview, 50,000 view, just because CMMC is quite detailed. It's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of information. Just to give you some context, I'm an instructor for the Certified CMMC Professional course and also the Certified CMMC Assessor course. And each of those courses are 5 days in duration, 32 hours of material. So there's a lot of information. I'm going to condense that down as much as possible over the next 30 minutes. I also want to make sure I leave time for questions as well. So let's jump into it. A little bit about myself. I am the founder and president of Aspire Cyber. We specialize in helping R1, those research universities, get CMMC compliant ASAP. Most organizations, whether it's universities, small businesses, large businesses, everyone hates compliance unless you're a GRC professional. So they want to get it over as quickly as possible. So we really focus on providing them with the tools, resources, and expertise, consulting support to accelerate that process and make it as painless as possible. Some of my hobbies, like running marathons, triathlons, traveling, been to 36 countries, live in Dallas, have a 3-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter. So they keep me pretty busy. So as far as, before we dive into the nuts and bolts of CMMC, you need to understand why it's important, who it applies to. So the scope of CMMC is the defense industrial base. So those organizations, whether it's universities, small businesses, large prime contractors like Lockheed Martin, the smaller subcontractors, any organization that's providing products and services to the Department of Defense is considered part of their defense industrial base, so their supply chain. And that consists of, it's estimated over 300,000 companies make up the DIB, and that's an estimate. The DoD doesn't even know, because they don't know how many subcontractors are actually part of that supply chain. But with that being said, CMMC is really a program to assess the defense industrial base, their compliance with existing contractual requirements for cybersecurity. And those cybersecurity requirements have been in place and been a contractual requirement for defense contractors and subcontractors since 2017. However, CMMC is still finalizing where it's going to get to the point where they're going to require external assessors to validate that compliance. I know when I first found out about CMMC, it was late 2021. Initially, I was shocked. I was surprised that the Department of Defense didn't already require some type of external validation or perform any type of assessments on their vendors. Because prior to starting Aspire Cyber, I worked for Bank of America doing third-party risk assessments. And yeah, the financial services industry, they have a pretty mature program for assessing their third-party vendors from a risk standpoint. Apparently, the federal government is behind on that, and essentially the DoD is leading the charge for the federal government. It's likely that CMMC will be adopted by other federal agencies, potential state agencies, and so forth once everything is completed. But once I saw that, I knew it was definitely going to be a great opportunity from a career standpoint, and a way to grow Aspire Cyber by focusing on doing CMMC assessments. And I'll talk more about the different career paths within CMMC. All right, so if you're interested in learning more about CMMC, whether you're supporting an organization that needs to meet CMMC compliance, or you're looking at it from a career standpoint, then your first stop should be this website. The DoD, they basically publish all of their documentation for CMMC. It includes the scoping guidance, the self-assessment guide, and also the various assessment guides. So this is the authoritative source for all documentation related to CMMC program. Wealth of information, definitely a great source there. Now, to get into a little of the overview of CMMC, it consists of 3 levels. So essentially you have level 1, and that's going to be for organizations that process, store, or transmit federal contract information. On the next slide, I'll go into a little more details of what that consists of. But yeah, federal contract information is going to be level 1. So think about that as just kind of high level general contract information that organization is receiving from the federal government. It has to be protected at this level 1 level. 17 requirements to do that, and that's an annual self-assessment. So if there's a defense contractor that only process, stores, or transmits FCI, then they will just have to submit an annual self-assessment attesting compliance with those 17 requirements. Now, once you get up to level 2, you see it's a big jump from level 1 to level 2. Once you get to level 2, an organization is processing, storing, or transmitting controlled unclassified information, CUI. Now they have 110 cybersecurity requirements that they have to comply with and fully implement. Now, the source of these requirements come from NIST SP 800-171, which is also a public publication. You can just go to Google it or go to the NIST website, and you can find these requirements. But these same requirements are mirrored in the CMMC assessment guides that I showed you on the previous slide. But yeah, at level 2, those defense contractors, subcontractors, they have to undergo a third-party assessment performed by a CMMC assessment organization, C3PO, every 3 years. So this is a major change from the way the DoD has been managing the risk of its third-party vendors. Essentially, up to this point, they've been accepting self-attestations that the vendors are in compliance. And as GRC professionals, we know how well self-attestations work, kind of taking that Scout's honor. Yeah, trust me, we have everything implemented properly. We're good to go, versus actually having a GRC professional perform that third-party risk assessment. So the results typically are vastly different. That's going to be at level 2. And then level 3 is going to be still controlled unclassified information, but more sensitive programs in nature. And those assessments will be led by the government. The Department of Defense has their own internal assessors, and they would do those assessments. However, these requirements, these levels are cumulative. So in order to be level 2 certified, you have to also already have implemented the level 1 requirements. So they're all encompassing. And then in order to get this level 3, you have to have a level 2 certification first. So I'll pause for a moment, see if there's any questions related to just the levels for CMMC.
Yeah, one of the questions that I wanted to go ahead and run by you is, does that mean that we should only focus on up to level 2? How familiar do we even need to look at level 3 at all, if that's go from the government end?
Really good question. I would say GRC professionals serving as consultants or helping companies internally, really up to level 2, and just have a general understanding of level 3, but as a consultant, you could be helping a company prepare for their level 3 assessment, but you just would not be performing that certification assessment. So that's going to be the distinction. But if you have a company, let's say you're helping a defense contractor that's working on sensitive projects like drones, or they're developing some type of technology for missiles or anything like that, where it's not classified like secret or top secret, but it's quite sensitive still in nature at CUI, then yeah, you may need to prepare them for the level 3 requirements, which off the top of my head, I think it's an additional 39 requirements. In addition to these 110, there's another 39 requirements that they have to meet to be a level 3.
Yeah, and then go ahead, Regine.
Oh, Derek, if someone was interested in level 1, would they need to have like a couple of years of audit work underneath their belt, or could they just start as a newbie?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, it's gonna start as a newbie. So we're going to look at some of the roles for the CMMC ecosystem. But let's see, as a consultant, let's say you're helping a small business, and there are a lot of small businesses that make up the defense industrial base. That's probably the vast majority of the organizations. We're going to be small businesses. You have your mom and pop stops, startups. Let's say they have no cybersecurity expertise in-house, and they consult with you and say, hey, help us get this level 1, complete this level 1 self-assessment, because we have to report this to the DoD in order to bid on this contract. Yeah, you can look at the requirements, which are in 800-171 or assessment guide, and they're pretty basic, and help them implement those requirements. So you don't really have to have any, I would say, any details or extensive cybersecurity experience, even at level 2 and level 3. But we're going to get into the actual certifications. Now, once you get into the certifications, there are some experience requirements and actual certification requirements as well. But for just helping a company do a level 1 self-assessment, as long as that company trusts you and have faith in your confidence, it's in your abilities, then yeah, you can help them. And a key is with this annual self-assessment, the organization, someone from senior leadership is going to have to report that, do an annual attestation saying that they're in compliance. So it wouldn't be you as the consultant. It would not be the IT guy or IT gal. It's going to be senior leadership. So someone highest level, whether that's a company owner or VP level, that's saying, yes, we are in compliance with level 1.
Thank you.
And then David?
Yeah, just a quick question. What about like security clearances? Do you recommend, like if I wanted to do even just level 1, do you recommend having security clearances, or is that not a big deal? Because if you have the CCM stuff, they will be happy to sponsor you or what for clearance?
Yeah. So a good distinction is with FCI and CUI, those are categories of data information. It's not classified information. So you need a security clearance when you're dealing with classified information. That's going to be secret, top secret. That's a whole separate process in terms of getting those certifications. But anything with CMMC does not require a security clearance. However, if you want to serve on an assessment team, those certification assessment teams working for a C3PO, then you will need to undergo it's called a tier 3 background check that's performed by the DoD. And they equate it to being equivalent to like a background check for a secret security clearance. So you are undergoing a background check, but you're at the completion of that background check, you're not getting a security clearance. You're just saying, okay, you're clear at a tier 3 level for background check. And that's only if you wish to serve on assessment teams or be a
What's your thoughts on 853s and the STIGs compared to CMC Model 2?
Yeah,
I think the STIGs are better because I'm old and grumpy, but throw your 2 cents on that, man.
Yeah, I would say 853, that's the big leagues, and CMMC is like the minor leagues. So
Thank you.
yeah, that's a whole nother, because think about it, everything from 800-171 comes from 853. So it's just a subset, a very small subset of the control.
My follow-up, Derek, I ain't gonna ask it. This is my last question because I think we're getting less security. It's less checks, less all of that. But like you were right, you're not required to do it because it's self-assessment. I just thought we should have made that mandatory with the 3POs. That's my last question on 53. Then we can move on. What's your thoughts on that? That was my 2 cents.
So I'm going to talk more about the C3POs, but for the C3POs, they do have to undergo a level 2 certification assessment.
Mm-hmm.
So they do have to fully demonstrate they fully implemented all 110 requirements. However, to your point, 800-171 the focus of it is just protecting the confidentiality of FCI and CUI, or ultimately CUI. So it's not concerned about integrity or availability like 853 is going to address all of that.
Yeah,
so it's a small subset. It is less security, but however, if you've been following the CMMC rulemaking process, it is quite a burdensome process to get this through to the finish line because there's so much pushback from the industry in regards to just the burden that they're complaining at with this level. So you can imagine 853.
I agree. Chris, I need this part cut between me and him. I'm put that on my channel, man. He said I'm correct. 53 is better. Now I'm just playing there. Thanks, Chris. Listen for that, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the question. Okay, so high level, as far as what is federal contract information, just key takeaway is any information that's not intended for public release. So if you're a government contractor or subcontractor, you're receiving information from the government that's not public, then that's going to be federal contract information. So that's a very broad category. A lot falls under that category. So pretty much good rule of thumb, if you're a federal contractor or subcontractor, then you're receiving federal contract information. So you at a minimum have to implement those 17 requirements. Oh, sorry, let me go back real quick. Controlled unclassified information, there's a actual information that a law or regulation requires the safeguarding of, so it's more sensitive in nature. So common. We're going to look at some examples, but it's going to be more sensitive. And then export control information, it's a category of CUI, but it's more sensitive as well. It has export controls. It can also think like ITAR, and it's going to have residency requirements and U.S. persons only having access, things like that. So it can get pretty, a lot of nuances with export control. Just some high level examples. You have FCI, if you think about delivery dates for your product that you're delivering to the government, schedules, RFPs can be FCI. An example I like to give is, let's say you have a profile with SAM.gov, and if you have to log into SAM.gov to look at that solicitation at RFP, then that's not public information at that point because it's behind that login. So at that point, it's protect FCI. CUI typically going to be more technical in nature or sensitive PII like blueprints, health information, etc. But there's an if you want to look at more of the different categories in the exhaustive list, you can go to the NARA website, which is the National Archives and Record Administration. They are the authoritative body that manages the CUI program, but they have different categories of examples of CUI. And then also DOD has a CUI registry that mirrors the NARA registry. Additional DOD Pacific categories for CUI. So there are going to be essentially an exception for COTS. So if an organization is selling strictly commercial off-the-shelf products, so think about like say software, Microsoft 365, if they're selling that to the government and it's no modifications for the government agency, it's just a Microsoft 365 subscription that anyone can get, then that will be considered commercial off-the-shelf. And then they would not have to have that level 2 certification, for example, for CMMC.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry I came late. You may have answered this question. Is there required a certification for level 1? So a newbie coming into this line of profession, is there a certification or a particular type of training that is required for the level 1?
No. So ultimately, on the consulting side of the house, there are no requirements from certification. So if you are able to land a client that trusts your expertise and wants you to support them throughout getting ready for their CMMC assessment, yeah, that's between you and that client. There's no requirement to have a certification. Whatever certifications come into play where they're required if you plan on serving on a certification assessment team. So if you want to be the one performing the CMMC level 2 certification assessments, then you have to have certifications, which we're going to take a look at momentarily. But on the consulting side, no, you don't need certifications. However, I will say that it's going to give you credibility, and it also, you're going to be able to be on the marketplace showing that you have the CMMC, the Cyber AB, their marketplace, showing that you have the appropriate certifications, so you can get clients that way. And then also when you're doing those sales calls, yeah, I'm noticing more and more clients are asking, are you certified and things like that? Because the thing is with CMMC, any regulations, there's a lot of nuances. So you can have extensive cybersecurity experience. That doesn't mean you understand CMMC, because there are a lot of nuances. So essentially what those certifications do is kind of give you more credibility and give your prospective clients more assurance that you know what you're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So high-level authorities for CMMC, the Office of Undersecretary, Department of Defense. So they own the CMMC program. And then the Cyber AB, they're a nonprofit organization, but they have a sole source contract with the DoD to essentially certify the assessment organizations, and then also handle the training, certifying the assessors and professionals and the registered practitioners. That's under the CACO. So these are the certification bodies for the CMMC. So hopefully, if you're not attending the Cyber AB, if you're interested in CMMC, I would recommend you attend the Cyber AB. They have a monthly town hall meeting. I think it's the last Tuesday of every month. Anyone can register, but you do have to register in advance. It's a Zoom meeting, and they share basically all the latest updates in the CMMC world. They keep you updated on what's going on, source of information. And then also if you go to their website, under there, if you go to, I think it's media and then town halls, all the recordings from previous meetings are there as well. A wealth of information. All right, so this is what I think that you all came here for, the main attraction. So the various certifications within the CMMC ecosystem. First, you have the registered practitioners, which is not a certification, it's a designation. And as of today, I think it's essentially like a 4-hour training. I took it like two years ago, so I'm not sure if they made updates since then. but it's like a 4-hour training, self-paced, on demand. I think you have to complete the quiz at the end, and then you can get the registered practitioner designation. And essentially, the purpose of the RPs is really to do more, focus more so on consulting, because RPs cannot serve on assessment teams, but they can help with consulting. So essentially, and you don't have to have this to do consulting, but this could, if that's something you wanted to get, 4 hours, I think, can't remember the price, maybe $150, $250, pretty reasonable. That's an option. And then it'll help you give you just kind of level overview of what the CMMC program is. And then if you want to serve on the assessment team, you have to first get your CCP, be a certified CMMC professional. That's going to require you attending the training from a licensed training provider. And I think it's 32 hours training. You have to complete that first. Then you pass the exam. And then at that point, you have to meet the education or experience requirements, which they're currently updating. So that's a moving target. But once you pass the exam and do everything you have to do as far as the criteria requirements, then you get your CCP. Then at that point, if you want to be an assessor, then you can go for the assessor, which is another training course, 32 hours, and pass an exam, background check, etc. So, but they have to go in that order. You have to be CCP first before CCA. But a CCP can serve on the assessment team. And then you have your third-party assessment organization. So those are going to be the authorized organizations that the CCPs and CCAs will work for, and they'll perform the certification assessments. Upon completing this, upon the organization is seeking certification, so the defense contractor, once they successfully complete that certification, score a perfect 110, meaning they've met all the requirements, then that CPPO will issue them a CMMC Level 2 certification, which ultimately they're going to need. Once CMMC is completely a final rule and in solicitations, ultimately that contractor is going to need to demonstrate they have that certification in order to bid on contracts that has that contractual clause in it. So as far as the scoring, I mentioned that essentially for every met practice, every practice that the assessor deemed is fully met is worth 1 point. There's 110 requirements at level 2. So if you get 1 point for each, your max score is 110. However, just to complicate things, DOD has special math. Each of those requirements has a specific weight, either 3, 5, or 1 points. So that's how you can get a negative 203. That's beyond the scope of this meeting, but yeah, it's just kind of give you an overview of what the scoring looks like. Assessor, pretty much their options in terms of performing an assessment. They can examine evidence, policies, procedures, screenshots, things like that. Or they can perform an interviewing the system administrator, for example, or perform a test where they're not going to physically touch any of the systems of the defense contractor, but they can have the, let's say, sysadmin log in, let me see your multi-factor configuration, and so forth. So that would be an example of a test. So these are 3 assessment methods. One thing that makes CMMC really challenging is that there is a lot of documentation requirements. US GRC professionals, if you enjoy documentation, doing policy, procedures, system security plans, you definitely have some job security within the CMMC ecosystem, because there's a ton of it. System security plan pretty much is the compliance story, tells exactly how that the DoD contractor is meeting all of the requirements. The SSP alone typically can range from anywhere from 100 to 300 pages. Lots of documentation, lots of policies, procedures, and so forth. So that's where those small businesses are really going to struggle with the documentation component. CMMC is a trust but verify. Those assessors want to verify. They're not just taking the word of that defense contractor. They need evidence. And this is the forms of evidence that's going to be provided. All right. Now we're coming up on time, so I'm going to go ahead and go back up for questions. But this is my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me, have any questions. Love talking CMMC. And then also on our Aspire Cyber YouTube channel, I put out a lot of content, videos around